Welcome, this is Joan Parker, the Shelby Stitcher, and I am right now in my bedroom. You can see at the bottom of the picture is the foot of my bed, and my design wall is on the wall that is right beside that. So there's not much space there, so it's hard to get a far away picture, but I wanted to start with this picture, and I'm going to pan over this way because otherwise I'd have to stand on the bed. The way this quilt came to be was I was given 3 large donations of fabric from friends, and one was from a friend's sister, one was from a friend's mother, and one was from the friend herself. In the box that I was given, there was a lot of this black fabric with the little teal colored floral viney looking thing. There was quite a bit of it, and it was all in 3 3/4 inch wide strips. And I will get to that in a future video, but I wanted to use up as much of that as I could. So I went through my strips of colors and used everything except the darkest blues because that would tend to blend in with the dark blue background fabric. And I'll show you in a later video how I cut those strips up and sewed them and made them into these blocks. Here's one individual block just so you get your perspective. Very, very simple to do. I've been quilting and piecing for 32 years, and this was honestly the easiest quilt I've ever made. So this is just going to be an overview of what the quilt looks like. I know it's easier to want to make something when you see it right at the beginning instead of waiting till the very end of the video and wasting your time and then thinking, well, I didn't want to make that, and you already spent 20 minutes watching the videos. I wanted to talk just a little bit about the colors while I'm in here where the design wall is. And as far as my design wall goes, I have 2 pieces of insulation board, and they are 4 feet wide and 8 feet tall. I took 2 of them, put them side by side, and then I took a vinyl backed tablecloth and wrapped it around and stapled it to the back with the flannel part on the outside. I've had these walls for over 20 years, and they are showing some wear, especially this one on the right. This was the older one, and where it's torn up is where it's been dragging along the floor at the bottom. And on the side over there, you can see the same thing where it's been rubbed up against something. But they are really great. I can lay out an entire queen size quilt on here. This quilt top will finish in the same proportion as a twin top, but be a little too small for a twin bed. It will be 52 inches tall when all the pieces are sewn together, and it will be 70 inches wide. So again, back to how I made this. I started by piecing all the blocks that I could with the black with the teal fabric on it, which is rounds 2, 4, 5, and then 1 block on the very corner of each corner. So after I had those made, I had 120 blocks, and I tried various layouts, and you can see them on my Instagram page or on Facebook. Keep in mind that this block can be laid out any way that a log cabin block can be laid out, with a straight furrows or a zigzag. This is barn raising, and this is the one I decided on. And this is why, when I started putting my blocks together just of this coloration, my quilt was very small, and it would have been perfect for a child, for a crib quilt or a toddler quilt. But I really got hooked on making the blocks with all these bright colors on the non-blue side, and I wanted to use up as many as possible. So I was given strips that were 3 3/4 inches wide, and that was all of them except for this medallion in the center. That was one piece of fabric I had in my stash that coordinated with the other blues, and that made 12 blocks. And I tried to figure how I could use that, and so this is the setting I came up with, because that very center square on point is 12 blocks worth. So I just went out from there, and as I ran out of the dark blue blocks, I started using the one with the little hearts on it, and then the rest is history, I guess. I just laid out my blocks, and I only made enough to fill up this wall. I do have one small strip to show you in the next portion of my video. What I'd like to do is just do all the sections, all the parts of the construction in short videos, and then you can access the ones that you need. I am brand new to doing anything on YouTube as far as posting videos, so please be patient with me as I struggle to do this. There's a lot to learn. I wanted to talk just a little bit while I had this whole thing in front of us about colors and about spreading out the weirdos. I don't know if you've ever gone to a children's camp when you were a child, and maybe you felt like you were really weird, but you hope nobody'd notice But if you and all the other kids who were weird in the same way that you were, and everybody's weird, let's just face that, if you hung out with all the kids that were the same weird as you, that would seem like a whole lot of weird. But if you spread out throughout the camp and people only saw one of you at a time, they thought everything was normal. So when you have a weird fabric, I'm trying to find a couple, this is one that is so bright, and I only have 2 or 3 little strips of it. Here's another part of that block that was probably the second half of that top one. And here's another one. I think there's only 4 of them in here because there was only 2 pieces of that fabric. You need to spread them out and not put them all within the same tiny area, because if you put them all in the same tiny area, that's really going to draw people's eye. And do you see the one right there? That's the 4th piece. I do need to move those other ones around a little bit more, but some fabrics tend to be very attention-getting, just extremely attention-getting, like this bright pinkish red. Fortunately, there's only 2 or 3 pieces of that. And again, just as you're laying your blocks out, try to spread out those ones. This is another one that maybe these don't stand out to anybody but me, but there's that one. That's a thinner strip of it. And then there's another huge piece of it right there. And one tip for avoiding those standing out is to cut your pieces at different widths so that that same width doesn't catch a person's eye. And there's a couple of these I will move around because as I looked at it, I saw that there were some that are too close together. I'm going to stop and give you a tip about laying your blocks out at this point. I was limited by the color of the blue where I could put them in the quilt. But even in these ones around the center, I tried, let me get closer so I can show you. Again, I have to walk around my bed, so if I fall on my face, you'll know what happened. Here's that like corn cob looking orange, which is with this blue. And here's another piece of it over here on that same blue block. And you can see that I put them on opposite sides of the block instead of putting them next to each other. And again, with this purplish polka dot, there's one there and there's some down there. If I put them close together, and there's a tiny piece up here, but if I put them all in that same, like in one little corner, they'd be so much more obvious. So what I do is as I'm making blocks, I'm adding them to my design wall, and I'll usually keep all of my new blocks in one hand or on one tabletop. And as I add them to what's already there, I'll take the one out that I'm replacing, and that's an old block, and so that color will be just naturally distributed. But I always take a picture and step back and see if there's any colors that are too close together, or if there's an area that's too dark or too light, because some of my blocks have much more light in them. Like I'm looking at this one right here. See how it's mostly light colors? I did have that one somewhere else where there were a lot of, I think over here where there were a lot of other lights, and I moved it over so that I didn't have a big splotch of light. But that's just some color, I'm sorry, that's just a few tips on arranging your colors and arranging your scrap blocks. And if you have a stack of blocks on your cutting table and one just stands out way too much, just don't use that one. I mean, these are, after all, just the itty bitty pieces of scraps that I had in my collection. So I'm going back to my sewing room now to record part 2. Thank you for watching, and leave a comment or a question if you have one.